Good evening, it's Sunday the 4th of July 2010, I'm Chris Jury and you're listening to Agitpop, the pop and politics show on North Cotswold Community Radio. Tonight we have a special location report from the annual Levellers Day celebrations in Burford. On Saturday the 15th of May this year I went down to Burford and spoke to some of the organisers, speakers, performers and guests at this annual gathering of left-wing activists that paradoxically takes place in the heart of our Conservative Prime Minister's constituency. The track you're listening to now is Oliver's Army by Elvis Costello.
Don't start me talking, I could talk all night, my mind was sleepwalking while I'm putting the world to right. Valkyrie's information, have you got yourself an occupation? Oliver's Army is here to stay, Oliver's Army are on their way, and I would rather be anywhere else but here today. There was a check on Charlie, it didn't crack a smile, but it's no laughing party when you've been on the murder mile. Only takes one itchy trigger, one more widow, one less white nigger. Oliver's Army is here to stay, Oliver's Army are on their way, and I would rather be anywhere else but here today. Hong Kong is up for grabs, London is full of abs. We could be in Palestine, overrun by the Chinese line, with the boys from the Mersey and the Thames and the Tyne. But there's no danger, it's a professional career, but it could be arranged. We're just awaiting Mr. Churchill's here. If you're out of luck or out of work, we could send you to Johannesburg. Oliver's Army is here to stay, Oliver's Army are on their way, and I would rather be anywhere else but here today, and I would rather be anywhere else but here today, and I would rather be anywhere else but here
And there we are, that's Oliver's Army by Elvis Costello. That's from 1978. He actually wrote that song on a plane coming back from Belfast, and it refers to Oliver's Army, the army of Oliver Cromwell, which is why we chose the song, because today we've got a special show here which is mainly made up of recorded interviews that I did earlier in the year down at Levellers Day in Burford, which for those of you who don't know is sort of one of the major dates in the left-wing calendar. Tony Benn comes up every year usually. He wasn't there this year actually, but he's been there all the years before, and a lot of speakers, and there's quite a few hundred people go there to Burford on a Saturday in May to celebrate, or commemorate, one should perhaps say, the illegal execution of three rebels in Oliver Cromwell's army back in 1642. And it's a rather extraordinary event that there you are in the heart of the beautiful tourist Cotswolds, which is also in David Cameron's constituency. And there we are having this Levellers Day festival, this left-wing festival. Very bizarre. So when I got there, I went and asked Joe Champion, one of the organisers, what it was all about, and this is what he had to say.
So, Joe, here we are in the beautiful Cotswold. Oh, as we stand here now, there's a large group of Japanese tourists coming past us to see the beautiful St John the Baptist Church in Burford. And here we are with a gathering of the great and the good of the left wing of the United Kingdom. I see T-shirts for the Socialist Party and the Green Party. Tony Benn, I know, is a great supporter. I can't imagine Tony Benn's widely loved in Burford, generally speaking. And so how do you fit in with the local government?
I think originally when we first started up, I think we're going to have to start again.
We'll start again. We've just got the... this is very amusing, actually, because we've just, as we're standing here doing the interview, the Japanese tourists have just stood next to us. And for those of you who speak Japanese, I'll just get a little bit of the commentary that she's given, the guide of St John the Baptist Church. So all those Japanese speakers, have a go at this.
今度は14世紀に付け足されて、で今度こちらの側、こちらの方が1400年代に付け足されるんです。そうしましてその左側のところにはですね、13世紀ぐらいにあった道具。
So there we are. All of the Japanese speakers there listening to North Cotswold Community Radio. You now know all about St John the Baptist Church from a Japanese perspective. So, Joe, let's go back to our question here about the relationship between Levellers Day and the local community.
Yes, well, I think in the beginning there was a little bit of a struggle to get started. But since then, the event has really, well, almost become a tradition in the town and has brought a lot to it and certainly raised the profile of Burford. And people now know about the events that happened here all over the world. I've heard people from America talking about what's happened here in Burford and the Levellers. In fact, quite often, people that aren't from Britain quite often know more about the Levellers than I certainly say learnt in my school years here.
In fact, I see that the Levellers Day is quite heavily featured on all the tourist board sites that refer to Burford.
Yes, it is. Not only that, it's also certainly part of the calendar of the left. In fact, I think sometimes it's recognised as the first festival or day of the year in the leftist calendar.
So what do you think the purpose of Levellers Day is now? Clearly, its purpose isn't to bring visitors into Burford and just be a tourist event. So what would you think the purpose of it is today?
The purpose of Levellers Day is as it was always meant to be, which is to commemorate the ideals of the Levellers, celebrate what they stood for and what they did. They basically gave up their lives for what they believed in. And it's also to address contemporary issues which would fit in with what the Levellers believed in, things that they would perhaps stand up for these days. So this year it's all about food and having, you know, how do we have a sustainable food source for, well, not just for the UK, but for the planet as a whole, I think, which affects that. So yes, it's very much about issues, political or otherwise, of today, which fit in with the Levellers' beliefs.
And you refer to the Levellers' beliefs there, so what, in a few sentences, would you say the Levellers stood for?
Okay, well, they stood for democracy, essentially. Well, originally they fought alongside Cromwell against the monarchy and for the parliamentarians. But then, actually, Cromwell eventually became a bit of a tyrant, certainly in shooting 3 of the Leveller soldiers here in the churchyard.
So that was me talking to Joe there, outside the church, surrounded by left-wing stalls and all the rest of it, and these bizarre group of Japanese tourists walking through it all, ignoring us all. It was a great little moment there. On our theme of the English Civil War, here is The English Civil War by The Clash.
Johnny come marching home again, hurrah, ta-da. It's coming by bus or underground, hurrah, ta-da. The world without a shed a tear, the seas bleed, so beaten and fair. It's just around the corner in the English Civil War. Still have to make your clubs and fists, hurrah, ta-da.
there we are, The Clash and English Civil War from 1979, which actually wasn't a song about the English Civil War of the 1640s. It was a song about the rise of the BNP at the time, and it was first performed at a Rock Against Racism gig against the National Front. But of course it ties very nicely into our theme of today. So I didn't know anything about this Levellers thing in Burford until about 3 or 4 years ago, when I actually went down there and was on a stall for a no to ID card thing. But I was absolutely amazed when I got there and found out this whole thing was going on. But I didn't know anything about the history of it. So while I was down there, I went to have a look and had a look in the church to find out some information about what it was all about. I'm inside St John the Baptist Church here in Burford now, and I'm looking for some graffiti that was written here back in May 1649, when 340 levellers were herded overnight into the church and kept prisoner here by Cromwell, who had arrived on May the 17th to storm the town with 2,000 cavalry. And he stormed the town and defeated the Leveller troops, some of whom had tried to barricade themselves into the Crown. Good place if you're going to barricade yourself in the pub. And they tried to barricade themselves in, but they'd failed. There were 800 Levellers here, and 500 of them sort of disappeared into the Cotswold Hills, but 340 of them were captured and overnight put in the church here in Burford. And it was the following morning, May the 17th, when the 3 leaders were taken out and shot, executed by Cromwell's men. And it's those 3 who we're celebrating today. But what I'm actually looking for, which I can't quite find yet, here we are. I'm looking here for the graffiti that was carved in the wood of the rood screen here. Anthony Sedley, 1649, prisoner, spelt Prisner, prisoner. And Anthony Sedley was a young man who was kept in here overnight and left his mark here for us. This sleepy little Cotswold tourist town of Burford has seen some great history, and a history of radical Britain, really. Charles I had just been executed. Cromwell was about to go to Ireland, and the New Model Army was not being paid and was beginning to rebel. And the Levellers, who had been led by a radical called John Lilburne, the Levellers were beginning to perceive that Cromwell was not going to fulfil the democratic and egalitarian aims of the New Model Army, and they were starting to rebel against it. And the events at Burford in 1649 were central to those developments, and they were part of how Cromwell in fact won that battle and asserted his power over more democratic and egalitarian colleagues like Lilburne. And now we have, from a band called the Levellers, who named themselves after these very guys, a band, if you're into protest songs, they've been around for quite a few years, about 15 years now, the Levellers, and this is their song, Liberty Song. And there we are, that's the Levellers' Liberty Song, because the Levellers, certainly rhetorically, were all about liberty and freedom, and the English Revolution was a sort of three-way struggle between the monarchy, really, the bourgeois, represented by Oliver Cromwell, and a more egalitarian, what we would now call a more left-wing output, which was represented by groups like the Levellers and the Diggers. So I discovered that when I went down there, I'd been around the church and I'd found the famous piece of graffiti there, but I still needed to look, because somebody had told me that there was something even more interesting in the graveyard. So I went to have a look.
So I'm now outside the church. I've come over to the plaque on the wall of St John the Baptist Church here in Burford, and it says, "To the memory of 3 Levellers, Cornet Thompson, Corporal Perkins and Private Church, executed and buried in this churchyard on the 17th of May 1649. So these men were captured by Cromwell the night before. They were kept in the church overnight. There was no trial, and they were brought out, put up against the wall and shot as an example to the 340 who had been kept in the church over the night. The murder of those 3 men put an end to the mutiny. The soldiers had originally gathered around Salisbury in May 1649, and they hadn't been paid, and they'd heard a rumour that they were going to be made to go to Ireland to fight the Irish, which they didn't wish to do. And in the spirit of democratic and cooperative governance, which the revolution had brought in, they sacked their officers and elected new ones. And those new officers took the 800 or so soldiers north to come to the Midlands, to Oxford, and they stopped at Burford. But they were chased by Cromwell and 2,000 cavalry. And when they got to Burford, he caught up with them. And they came into Burford, into the town, the mutineers, and Cromwell stormed the town with his 2,000 cavalry. They were routed, many of them disappeared into the Cotswold Hills, and 340 of them were captured and put into the church overnight. The following morning, Cornet Thompson, Corporal Perkins and Private Church, taken out of the church, brought over here, and one by one they were shot against the wall, with no trial, no legal representation. In fact, I'm now standing by the exterior wall of the churchyard, where I'm reliably informed there are some bullet holes, although historians argue about whether or not they're actually the bullet holes of the execution. Oh, there we are. Yes, I can see that now. When you tell the story like this is like something out of Yugoslavia in the 90s, with 340 men barricaded into a church, people being brought out and summarily executed without trial. These were interesting times, as they say.
Very interesting times, and when you're there and you're looking at bullet holes in the wall, this is, as I say, something from Bosnia, and it all happened in Burford, which is quite extraordinary, really. We've now got a song here by a band called Chumbawamba, who, through doing this show, I've discovered Chumbawamba in great detail, actually, and I must say they are amazing. I'm a very, very big fan of Chumbawamba these days. But this song was originally an English ballad, and it refers to this idea that the world was turned upside down in the English Revolution in the 1640s. It's also the title of a book by a famous Marxist historian called Christopher Hill, who wrote a book called The World Turned Upside Down, a very famous book that changed the perspective in the 60s and 70s of people looking at the English Civil War. So here it is, The World Turned Upside Down.
Through eating too much supper, before I went to bed, strange thoughts came on my slumber, strange thoughts came in my head. This world was topsy-turvy, and people of renown were doing the most peculiar things as the world turned upside down. I dreamt all men were equal, and there were no starving poor, and nations never did quarrel, nor never went to war. I dreamt all men were angels, and women ne'er wore a frown. Old maids, they had large families, as the world turned upside down.
And I'm sure there's many of the great burghers of the civil burghers of Burford may feel that the world has been turned upside down when there's a march of Reds under the beds and lefties through their town, which was something I would return to throughout the day when talking to people about the incongruity of this celebration of left-wing thought since the 1640s to today, taking place in the Cotswolds. I mean, the day itself, Levellers' Day, is a great day out. Actually, there's all stalls in the square outside the church, and then in the back of the hall there is like a cafeteria, and then there's bands play in the afternoon, and we're going to be hearing a lot of music from them. Seize the day with a headline act with various other bands on as well. Some great stuff there in the great history of protest songs. But to find out more about Levellers' Day itself and the organisation, I then went and spoke to Robin Wheeler, who is the chief organiser.
So I'm here in the little cafeteria beside the church, getting some much needed caffeine, which I'm having injected directly into my veins as we speak. And I'm here with Robin Wheeler, who is the festival director.
Good morning.
And Robin, what's the festival director do?
Well, basically, on the day itself, I'm in charge of the stewarding and the safety and overseeing the stewarding operation. I'm the point of contact for the emergency services. Everybody on the committee has a role on the day. We have a stage manager, we have people on the exit gate, we have door staff, and we have a large number of stewards to man the procession and make sure all goes off well.
Are you a Burford resident?
No, I'm not. I do live in West Oxfordshire, though.
It's quite incongruous, isn't it, really, to have such a major event in the sort of left-wing summer calendar here in the leafy Cotswolds?
Well, this is where the Leveller soldiers were shot outside Burford Church in 1649, so it's the natural home for the event.
What made you become involved in it?
I think I saw a poster about 15 years ago for the event, and I actually knew some of the afternoon entertainment performers that were on, and that took my interest, and I bought a ticket and I came along, and 2 years later I was involved in the committee, and I've been helping organise ever since.
And what made you want to become involved? Did it appeal to your own political beliefs?
Certainly does, yes. Quite a lot of us try and live our lives by the ideals of the Levellers and people of that time, and there are reflections of the Levellers in daily life, even today.
So what do the Levellers mean for you? What do they stand for you?
They stood for freedom and democracy, freedom of speech, and liberal ideas, some radical ideas, and they were ahead of their time on a lot of issues, voting reforms, freedom and democracy.
Why do you think it's important that we celebrate Levellers' Day today in 2010?
The theme of Levellers' Day each year is always a topical theme, and quite often that ties in directly to an original idea of the Levellers. And quite often the Levellers are quoted by politicians on the radio, on TV, because their ethos is similar to politicians of today.
So do you see this as a celebration of Britain's radical past or part of our ongoing radical movement?
Both, totally both. Definitely a celebration, also a commemoration, because people were shot outside Burford Church. So we remember them, and we have a minute's silence to remember them, but also to celebrate the lives of the Levellers, John Lilburn, and all the other people involved in the Leveller movement and the writing of the Agreement of the People.
Why do you think a procession through the town is important?
It's part of the celebratory atmosphere of the day. It's something to be celebrated, not just mourned.
So you think it's a positive statement?
Absolutely. It shows that people remember the Levellers and what they stood for.
Thank you very much.
And thank you there to Robin and everyone else who organises the thing, Levellers Day. It's very well organised and well put together thing done by local people, all volunteers, and it's as I say, it's a great day, a great thing to go to on a Saturday in May, especially when the weather's good like it was this week. It was really very good. We've got another song now from the Levellers themselves, from their album A Weapon Called the Word, and this is Barrel of the Gun.
In a strange land, far from these shores, like two men and a woman killed by the law. No matter what country under the sun, you can't meet a justice from the barrel of a gun. A cop on, they say, the SAS on a fence. Shot in the back makes no difference. Oh no, so no matter what country under the sun, you can't meet a justice from the barrel of a gun. Shoot to kill, till both sides have their fill. Till both sides have their martyrs, and all their kids have no fathers. Oh no, so no matter what country under the sun, you can't meet a justice, the barrel of a gun. Oh, tell your mothers having a son, tell your battle it is won, till both sides they have lost all the blood that it costs. So no matter what country under the sun, you can't meet a justice, no, from the barrel of a gun.
And there we are, another track by the Levellers there, Barrel of a Gun. So I then moved into the square and started to talk to people who were on all these stalls from various organisations, and I met up with some people. The people were there from all over the country, and I firstly met up with a guy called Jerry Paul who had come down from Merseyside, and this is what he had to say.
And I'm now talking to someone who's come down here to Levellers Day all the way from Merseyside, and I'm talking to...
Jerry Poole from Merseyside CND.
What's brought you down here, Jerry?
Well, this is my 4th year down here. 5 years ago we were coming through Burford. We popped to visit to see the church and I read the history of the Levellers. Also a great friend of mine known for many years, Tony Benn. And Tony Benn, his wife, as you know, unveiled the plaque for them 20 odd years ago. So we, as I say, we make it a personal trip to come here every year to see the events and hopefully meet up with friends again, which we always do. That's why my reason for coming down here.
Does it seem incongruous at all that one of the sort of first of the summer left-wing events happens in the middle of Tory Oxfordshire, Gloucestershire?
Well, I find it very ironic. I think it's a wonderful thing because I do know when it was first started, Douglas Hurd was very much against the fact that someone like Tony Benn was coming down here to check on this event. As I say, I think it's a wonderful thing. I mean, I meet up, my union's opposite over there, and meet up with a lot of friends. Peter Thatcher was here last year. So it does bring a large variety of people and organisations here.
And I'm also joined here by...
Chris Rowland. I teach theology at the University of Oxford.
And Chris Rowland is going to be reading out the commemoration for the Levellers.
Yeah, the climax of today is remembering the 3 men who were killed by Cromwell because they refused to go and fight in Ireland. It's an important bit of English history and a period when there was a real opportunity for social change in England in 1649. And these men and many others, and women as well, had a vision of society which I think we're only just about beginning to kind of bring about.
In about an hour from now, there's going to be a procession through the town. Why do you think that's important to have a procession? Because the speakers are in the garden of the Warwick Hall and the stalls are here in the square, sort of tucked away a bit. So why do you think it's important to have a procession through Burford?
I think you've just put it very nicely. I mean, it's not a hole in the corner event. I think what processions always do is remind people that something important is going on. And in any situation, not just Burford, but anywhere, actually reminding people that there are other things about history and about contemporary life which need to be brought to their attention.
It struck me that the current discussions around PR are actually part of this ongoing battle, actually, that the British people have had for over 1,000 years to try and get representation in their own country.
Yes, I mean, when you look at the voting pattern in this last election, the number of seats compared with the number of votes is absolutely ludicrous. But what I am very dubious about is that this pact between the Liberal Democrats, who a lot of great friends of mine, activists in Liberal Democrats, and absolutely gutted with the sellout, but I just don't think it'll achieve what they want, because on the other side there's too many Tories really don't want this pact either. But the principle of PR and what Chris was saying about with the Levellers, PR is a very, very important thing, and I think it gives a fair reflection on people's votings if we do have a system like that. Because I do believe that, I was doing a quick calculation the other day, under the PR system being operating, on the votes the Liberal Democrats got, I think they would have got about 130 odd seats. So something's radically wrong there.
There's a sort of idea around the British of this great tradition of freedom, but of course universal suffrage only came about in the 1920s. As you say, we now have a system where representation of the vote doesn't represent the Parliament, so we've still got a long way to go.
Yes, it's true, and I think the Levellers, as an example, they stuck by the principle and they fought for change, and we do have, in theory, the right to practice your religion, which is one of the points that they were fighting 400 years ago. So I think we have to campaign and hope for a much fairer system of voting, and we'll keep that going.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thanks.
And that's the type of conversations you have in Burford on Levellers Day. It's I found it thrilling. If you've listened to Agitpop when we have the guests in, you can imagine I found it a really great day. This is the first track from the headline act of the day, who are called Seize the Day, who were fabulous. And this is from their Alive album, and this is I Am Dust.
Down here with me. We've had fun running and being wild with each other. Lay down here and be my lover. I want to feel close to this land. Run that I love. Sometimes when we make love, it all comes back to me. The sky fills with memories. Warm breeze, blue skies, cornfields and summer sun. I weep as I lay in the arms of one that I find something sacred, naked and true. And I want a real world, I want a real life, I want to feel fully alive. Warm breeze, blue skies, cornfields and summer sun. As I lay in the arms of one that I love, give us back our fields and our oceans and the clean air so we can breathe. Give us back our fields and our oceans and the clean air so we can breathe again. If the earth were my lover, would I treat him this way? If you were my brother, could I watch you waste away? Stop feeling small, you're a part of it all, and everything you say and do, every time you let the truth come through, it makes a difference. Believe in your significance. Warm breeze, blue skies, cornfields and summer sun. I weep as I lay in the arms of one that I love. Give us back our fields and our oceans and the clean air so we can breathe. Give us back our fields and our oceans and the clean air so we can breathe. Well, there's no one to blame or should hang their heads in shame. We're all born the same, and we are clean air so we can breathe. I weep as I lay in the arms of one that I love. Taking back our fields and our oceans, I should be so we can breathe. Taking back our fields and our oceans, taking back the clean air again.
There we are. I Am Dust by Seize the Day. Rather beautiful there. I think that's lovely. They opened the set with that, I think. They opened the set with that, and it was really lovely because it was a beautiful summer's day. So, really lovely. So I walked into this square, and there I am, all these different stalls of all these groups. And the first group I happened to come across were the Oxford Palestine Solidarity Group, and this is what they had to say.
I'm now looking around some of the stalls all outside the church and the Warwick Hall here in Burford Centre, and I'm at the stall of the Oxford Palestine Solidarity Campaign. It's easy for me to say. And I'm joined by
Jenny Stanton from Oxford.
Shadar Cook from Oxford.
Caroline Rain from Oxford.
What brings you to Levellers Day?
Well, I first came with my kids when I used to do woodcraft folk, and I've got very interested in the Levellers in terms of their place in history. But we come now because it's a great place to put out our store for Palestine Solidarity. You get a lot of people here who are sympathetic, which makes a really nice change from when we do our stall in the street back home in Oxford.
Does it ever strike you the incongruity of one of the major days in the left-wing calendar taking place in the cuddly Cotswolds?
I think it's wonderful. I think it's really good to have this in Burford when usually people have to go to London and the big cities for these sort of events, and I think it's very important to have this in Burford where history happens and let the people of Burford actually participate and enjoy this event.
What's the background on the Oxford-Palestine Solidarity campaign?
Well, we're part of a national movement, and there are loads of people all over the country who are concerned about the plight of the Palestinians. It's sort of one of the main huge injustices that's still going on. I was involved in the anti-apartheid campaign for years, and it reminds me of that. And it's a case that more and more people are drawn in because they can see the injustice, they don't know what to do. And in the Palestine Solidarity campaign, we're building a campaign like the anti-apartheid movement. We try to influence politicians, we don't get very far, but it can be at grassroots level and building for people to do boycott. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention about being at Burcott is a lot of us can't often be here because the day that it's on clashes usually with what we call Nakba Day, which is the anniversary of when the Palestinians were driven out of their villages. They call it the Nakba, which means the disaster. But this year we decided as a national organisation that we campaign locally, so we're here in more force than usual. Yeah.
And how do you think your values as an organisation and as political individuals chime with the values of the Levellers?
Because I think it's all about struggle for people's rights through the centuries, and we have to go on struggling, and that's why we're here today and why I think it fits very well with the original Leveller struggle.
And there we are, the Oxford-Palestine Solidarity campaign. I'll tell you, they're a lovely bunch, these mad lefties. They're a very lovely bunch of people, and it was a pleasure to talk to them. My name's Chris Jury. You're listening to Agitpop on North Cotswold Community Radio. If you've got anything to say about Levellers Day, you could call us on 0844 880 8265 or email on studio@northcotswoldsonline.com or text NCCR plus your message to 6300. Our next track now is, if I can find my list here, the next track here is another one by Chumbawamba, because this is from an album that Chumbawamba did, English Rebel Songs 1381 to 1914. They're all a cappella. You've got to bear in mind, Chumbawamba, this is the band who did I Get Knocked Down But I Get Up Again. And the range of their output in this whole album was all a cappella English Rebel songs. And then they updated it after the miners' strike and put some later songs in. And this is The Diggers' Song.
You noble diggers all, stand up now, stand up now. You noble diggers all, stand up now. The wasteland to maintain, seen cavaliers by name. Your digging does maintain, and persons all defame. Stand up now, stand up now. With spades and hoes and ploughs, stand up now, stand up now. With spades and hoes and ploughs, stand up now. Your freedom to uphold, seen cavaliers are bold, to kill you if they could, and rights from you to hold. Stand up now, diggers all. The lawyers they conjoin, stand up now, stand up now. The lawyers they conjoin, stand up now. To arrest you they advise, such fury they devise. The devil in them lies, and have blinded both their eyes. Stand up now, stand up now. The clergy they come in, stand up now, stand up now. The clergy they come in, stand up now. The clergy they come in and say it is a sin that we should now begin our freedom for to win. Stand up now, diggers all. The gentry are all round, stand up now, stand up now. The gentry are all round, stand up now. The gentry are all round, on each side they are found. Their wisdom so profound, to cheat us of our ground. Stand up now, stand up now. The club is all their law. Stand up now, stand up now. The club is all their law. Stand up now. The club is all their law, to keep poor men in awe, that they no vision saw, to maintain such a law. Stand up now, diggers all.
And there we are, the Diggers Song by Chumbawamba from their album English Rebel Songs 1381 to 1914. This is Chris Jury, you're listening to Agitpop on North Cotswold Community Radio. So after the the Oxford Palestine Solidarity Committee, I moved round a bit and spoke to some people on another table.
I'm standing in the square outside at Warwick Hall, and in front of me is a huge poster of Che Guevara. Is that incongruous or what? I'm here at the stall with
Carol Stavris, Secretary of the Oxford-Cuba Solidarity Campaign Group.
Which explains the massive poster of Che Guevara. What brings you particularly to Levellers Day in Burford?
Well, we've been here for many years. We're part of the Labour movement. We like to think we are anyway, because we represent campaigning for Cuba, which, as you know, had a revolution 51 years ago, where they ousted horrible dictator Fulgencio Batista, and since then they've had rights for the ordinary people of Cuba. The power is with the ordinary people's hands, which I believe was something that the Levellers were trying to fight for all those years ago, so I suppose we have got something in common there.
And what brought about a Cuba solidarity group in this particular part of the South Midlands?
Well, we're part of the National Cuba Solidarity Organisation. There are groups all up and down the country. Oxford is particularly strong. We've got a thriving group there. We regularly get Cubans coming to talk to us, Cuban visitors coming to talk to us, and we put on things like film shows, we have social events, we take part in events like this.
And what particularly made you put your effort and political energy into supporting Cuba?
Well, I believe that what the Cubans did 51 years ago benefited the Cuban people as a whole. I've been to Cuba a couple of times. I've seen socialism in action there. I've seen what the Cuban Revolution's done for the people. It's given them fantastic education. I think it's 99.9% literacy levels. Their health service is second to none. It equals anything that we've got in the Western world. For a poor country, that's an amazing achievement.
You must have particularly enjoyed the section in the Michael Moore film where he took the Americans to Cuba to be treated by the Cuban health service.
Yes, that was wonderful, wasn't it?
A great moment, I think, in radical cinema. So anyway, thank you very much for talking to us, and good luck with the rest of the day.
So there we are, the Cuba Solidarity campaign in the square in Burford. Rather wonderful. One of the great ironies, I think, of the last 15 years is that Guantanamo Bay is in fact in Cuba, and Guantanamo Bay is of course where the US chose to put many of the suspected terrorists in their campaign after 9/11, and it is, as I say, great irony that there we are, this island off America, which has been under this economic barricade from America since Castro took over, is now home to what many people think is a terrible, terrible injustice and act of oppression by, in fact, America, the supposed land of the free. And this is a Seize the Day song which riffs on that idea of Guantanamo Bay.
I think most people know about Guantanamo Bay, or they've heard a lot about it, and it's been bad press mainly, and we think it's been misrepresented. People are saying that innocent individuals have been walking along the streets in Pakistan and places, they've been picked up by the FBI, CIA, bundled off, found themselves kept in cages in Guantanamo Bay, with no right of appeal and possibly facing execution. We say that's all nonsense. Actually, it's Club X-Ray, and they're having a great time there. And they're learning this dance. And it's called the Shackle Shuffle. These two people are going to demonstrate on the stage, these two up here. like all the people at Guantanamo Bay, a very willing volunteer here. Going to have to imagine that they're in orange boiler suits, because that's de rigueur at Club X-Ray. And you may worry that she's a child, but you know, some of the people at Guantanamo Bay are under 16 years old. It doesn't matter. It's a happy little song.
It's a happy little place.
It's a happy little place. It's Club X-Ray. If you're a sheikh who is a mover, or fundamentally a groover, get with the brothers on maneuver, coming at you all the way from Cuba, not the Cuba of Havanas, where the presidente is bananas, but the Cuba that is free, looking over the sea to the Florida Key, to democracy. At Guantanamo Bay, it's the US of A. Shackle shuffle every day, like the Club X-Ray. Wear a chain on your wrist to the Islamicist. Bossa Nova with a twist, and it goes like this. Put your hands on your head, reach. A shackle shuffle to the left, move. You do the monkey squat and then squat. You shackle shuffle back again, bow in prayer to the east. Pray, down on your belly like a beast. Beast, you're never gonna be released. Peace, till the day you're deceased. No time for sleeping at Club X-Ray. No time for chilling out the next day. Although we wouldn't call it torture, we're gonna sweat you now we've caught you. At first you feel humiliated, 'cause every move is regulated. But as the beat interrogates you, you join the club that liberates. At Guantanamo Bay, it's the US of A. Shackle shuffle every day at the Club X-Ray. At Guantanamo Bay, it's the US of A. Shackle shuffle every day at the Club X-Ray. Put your hands on your head, reach, and shackle shuffle to the left. Move. You do the monkey squat and then squat. You shackle shuffle back again, bow in prayer to the east. Pray, down on your belly like a beast. Easy, you're never gonna be released. Peace, till the day you're deceased. It isn't really so important whether you came just as a combatant or just a towel-headed farmer who had a cousin called Osama. We're not conventional believers, no busybodies from Geneva. If you're a friend of Tora Bora, there's no restriction on the door. All you need to get in is a beard on your chin, an indefinite stay, and you don't have to pay. At Guantanamo Bay, it's the US of A. Shackle shuffle every day at the Club X-Ray. Put your hands on your head, reach. Shackle shuffle to the left, move. You do the monkey squat and then squat. You shackle shuffle back again, bow in prayer to the east. Pray, down on your belly like a beast. Peace, you're never gonna be released. Peace, till the day you're deceased. Of Gideon's Koran. Oh, heck, did I forget to mention, we're busy building an extension where every wish will be respected as you are lethally injected. We the pipeline too late, but you got in the way, so we sacrifice you to the needs of the few. In the heat of high noon, you will dance to our tune, an example to all to obey unit call. See the prisoners kneel with the right of appeal in the land that is free, free to take liberty till the sea starts to boil, till we run out of oil. At one time
And there we are, Guantanamo Bay by Seize the Day from their album Alive, which is obviously a live album of their stuff. Treating a very serious subject there with some ironic humour. I was then, as I carried round the stall, the stalls there in the square at Burford, I was bumping into various people, and I met this guy next.
I'm still here beside Che Guevara, and I'm joined by
Andrew Northall from Kettering in Northamptonshire.
So Andrew, what's brought you all the way to Burford from Kettering?
I just heard there was a Levellers Day on today. I wanted to see what was actually happening. I had some vague awareness of what the Levellers were all about. So standing for liberty, for democracy. Understood they were part of the original Republican movement under Cromwell, but sort of fell out, and I understood a number of the leaders were executed as a consequence of that. So I just wanted to see what was happening and in some way to show my support for freedom and democracy.
And how did you find out in Kettering about this event here?
I'm a member of the local Communist Party, and the local Communist Party sort of advertised the fact there was a Levellers Day in Burford. So.
The Communist Party? I didn't even know the Communist Party was still recruiting.
Absolutely, yes. It's rather small, and we wish we were bigger and more influential, but we're been here since 1920 and still believe very strongly that the original ideals of fighting for socialism, where people, ordinary working people actually own and run the economy and society, is the right model, and everything we see and hear about today's society just reinforces that belief.
How are you finding it down here then?
Oh, it's a fantastic day, beautiful weather, and sort of lots of people around, and just taking in the atmosphere and seeing how things pan out, really. So, yeah.
And how do you feel about this event taking part in the heart of the tourist Cotswolds?
I thought you were going to say Tory Cotswold. It just feels in some ways slightly incongruous. So we're sort of celebrating some revolutionaries from a number of hundred years ago, bang in the middle of what appears to be very literally a leafy, well-to-do Oxfordshire little village. It's a nice contrast, and just enjoying it.
But of course, in 1649, the entire country was the leafy country village.
Yes, and a republic as well.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Andrew Northall there from the Communist Party of Great Britain. As I say, I was quite taken aback there. It had a special resonance for me because, in fact, for about 18 months back in 1977, I think it was, I was actually a member of the Communist Party of Great Britain. So there'll be a file on me somewhere. And then after the fall of the Berlin Wall, there was various factional splits in the Communist Party, and I thought it had disappeared, but obviously not. There's Andrew there, keeping the red flag flying, as they say, in Burford. Again, bizarrely. And that leads us on to another song by Seize the Day, which I thought was very appropriate in the circumstances with all these comments about. And it's the work song.
Sacrifice my birthright for a promise daily broken. Eat away my spirit with a thought that's never spoken. Extra man behind me on consumables ahead. No sympathy between me and the labour mill I tread. I sacrifice my birthright for a promise daily broken. I eat away my spirit with a thought that's never spoken. Domesticated animals, we pace the factory floor. And I don't know what all of this machinery is for. But I sacrifice my birthright for a promise daily broken. I eat away my spirit with a thought that's never spoken. My body is rebelling and my head begins to ache. I'm taking all the pressure for some other fool's mistake. But I sacrifice my birthright for a promise daily broken. I eat away my spirit with a thought that's never spoken. I think of my possessions and the money that I owe. I think that I'm a coward and I wish it wasn't so. But I sacrifice my birthright for a promise daily broken. I eat away my spirit with a thought that's never spoken. And when the work is over, we get drunk and let off steam. We talk about rebellion and we talk about our dreams. But there's no way we'll ever act upon the things we've spoken. We sacrificed our birthright for a promise daily broken. Day in, day out, what's it all about? 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 about day in, day out? What's it all 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 about? Thanks very much.
There we are, Work Song by Seize the Day. I then moved on around the square and I started talking to some other people here from Amnesty International, not Jerry Paul's mates. Jerry Paul was, if you remember, from Merseyside Amnesty International, but these were from the Oxford Amnesty International.
I'm now talking to some representatives of Amnesty International here, and I've got with me...
I'm Tricia Rowett. I'm the secretary of the Chipping Norton Amnesty International Group. We meet monthly in Chipping Norton.
And I've also got with me...
Peter Burns. I'm a group member, and we try and carry out Amnesty International campaigns as best as we can as a local group. We represent all that Amnesty stands for. Although it's a small town, we make our presence felt, and that's why we're here at Levellers Day, and we've been at Levellers Day every year as far as I can remember, and it's an opportunity to tell our fellow workers of different organisations what we do and how we fit into what they do. And also, of course, we're trying to speak up for people like those imprisoned in Burma and in other countries, and do what we can.
Do you think it's important that issues like this are raised in the sunny Cotswolds? Do you think people are that interested in these world events in this area?
Yeah, I think actually particularly in an area like this, because many people are not aware of what's going on around the world. Many people have come up even today and said that they don't know anything about what's happening in Burma. It's not in the news very much, and many of the events and the people that we're trying to support don't get onto the headline news because they are small trade union groups and worker solidarity groups. They're fighting for the sort of democracy that we take for granted, and I think it's up to Chippy, Amnesty and other groups to get people to think about how their own democracy works and how important it is that other people have that opportunity too.
The story of events here, with the imprisoning the 340 in the church overnight and then taking them out and shooting them against the wall without any trial or any other form of representation, it does sound, when you describe it like that, a lot like some of the atrocities that happen across the world today.
Yeah, but it also, we've got to think of what's happening in our own country, and people who are in prison, who have not been tried, not always told what the case is against them. We're following the American lead, and we are losing our civil liberties. And whether you live in the Cotswolds or whether you live in Rangoon, everybody has to think about these matters. And just to pick up what you said about the sunny Cotswolds, the place is packed with tourists in the summer from all over the world. And we are not as isolated as perhaps you're thinking we are. And we are part of an international community as well as a national community.
I came here myself on a stall about 3 years ago with No to ID. The IPS website has announced that ID cards will be disbanded. How do you feel about that?
I'm delighted because, it's not Amnesty's function necessarily to talk about ID cards, but we are concerned about the increasing surveillance in our society. And certainly over the last governments, there has been a loss of civil liberties. On the argument that they're preventing terrorism, they're also preventing our full democracy to work.
Thank you very much there from Amnesty International, and for whom the bell tolls there. It tolls for thee. So, thank you very much.
There we are, some lovely people from Chipping Norton Amnesty International there. Sorry, I said Oxford, but they were Chipping Norton Amnesty International. Good on you there. And we've got a song now from another... You'll get the theme here. I think you're getting it gradually, aren't you? Because this is by New Model Army. And New Model Army, of course, was another name for Oliver's Army. Oliver Cromwell's army, they were called the New Model Army, and this is a band named after them. And this is their song, Today is a Good Day.
This is absolutely stunning. Wall Street has seen very, very few days like this. The mortgage crisis has now taken down two of the biggest names among stories.
$300 million in the 8 years leading up to Lehman Brothers.
Employees and many hundreds
And there they are, the new model army. Not quite the folk songs that we've been hearing before. Now then, and you should, we're going to go hear a little interview that I did now with some of the Morris men who were in the who were getting ready, because there's a particular Morris band who do this Levelers Day thing, and you've got to bear in mind, if you go on to the Facebook page, the Agitpop Facebook page, I've put pictures up of this, and you can see that some of them are in 17th century costume and whatever. And there's a fantastic picture of the lady who I'm interviewing in this little clip next.
I was going to ask you how you got to be the Morris dancing team to do Levelers Day, but you've explained it, that actually this is your gig.
It is, it's our gig, and it has been for quite a long while. And I think the person who invited us was a wonderful man called Dennis Manners. who used to organise the parade for many, many years, and Dennis invited us.
Something that's always intrigued me, actually, is how one becomes a Morris dancer.
Oh, well, I went to Sidmouth Folk Festival and watched lots of Morris dancing, and I sort of said jokingly, oh, I'm going to try that out when I get back to Oxford. And then I told enough people that I couldn't really go back on my word, and I just looked on the internet and found Cry Havoc and went along and really enjoyed it.
Well, a lot of the dances, I understand, are sort of ancient pagan fertility rites, and they seem to have worked here because you're 6 months pregnant, and I think there's another one here in the pushchair.
Yeah, that's my daughter Bethan. We like the story. We're not sure how much truth there is in it, but it's nice to think of mystical origins.
Well, it certainly seems to be working in your case, I have to say. You don't sound like a local Oxfordshire chap to me.
No, I'm originally from London, and I've only been living in Oxford for 37 years, so I'm an incomer.
And what led you to get involved in Morris dancing?
One afternoon at a village fete in North Inksea, I had too much to drink, too much real ale, and that's why I became a Morris.
That'll do it. That'll do it every time. And you haven't come out of the blackout yet?
No, not yet.
It'll be a shock when you do, believe me.
Well, I hope I don't.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much. Enjoy the march and have a lovely day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, there's a bit of a disagreement here about who actually wrote the song. Anyway, what's your name, sir?
My name's Howard, and that song and dance is called Rufty Tufty, and it's published by a man called John Playford, he wasn't a musician, he wasn't a dancer, and he went around the country and he collected hundreds and hundreds of tunes and dances and published them. And if he hadn't done, we wouldn't know any about them at all. And our group are called the Vale Islanders, and we meet up and we dance the dances and play the music.
And what you can't see, dear listeners, is that this band here, the
Vale Islanders,
are all in 17th century costume here. Do you normally play in 17th century costume?
Yeah, when we're dancing out, we do, yes. And in the pub, too.
Have you done much on Levellers Day?
This is just our second Levellers Day.
Do you think it's important, Levellers Day?
Yes, I suppose in the calendar of events for 17th century, it's a good thing to do, yeah.
Socially, it's certainly a good thing to remember and to celebrate. It's the first time I've been here. I'm looking forward to it very much.
Thank you, Howard. Thank you. And there it is, the lovely Morris men, and they were all, and the musicians were all in 19th century costume there, dressed as levellers and diggers and all of that. And I mean, I have to say that Morris dancing has always I'm not a great fan of Morris dancing and that type of thing, I have to say. But they were absolutely delightful people there, and the photograph of that gorgeous young woman there, but very, very pregnant, dressed in her Morris costume, was it did make me smile, and they were absolutely delightful. But as I've actually always been a bit terrified by Morris dancers, it must have been some terrible event in my childhood or something like that. The psychoanalysts could have fun with that, couldn't they? I've chosen another Seize the Day track called Scared.